Well. Hello, and happy marvelous Monday, everybody. I hope that you are well. I'm so excited that you are joining me today. I'm going to touch on a much needed conversation that I believe will be beneficial to a lot of people today. But before I get into that, again, let me just say thank you, welcome. Thank you for tuning in today. Those of you who are joining me live by way of Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. I am super delighted that you are here. And I just want to say that today's discussion is going to be super impactful for a lot of people. And again, I'm glad that you are joining me today. I'm here to answer your questions pertaining to residential rental housing matters. So, welcome to this thought provoking segment. This is what I do each and every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm right here on Facebook, I'm on YouTube, and I am on LinkedIn. Don't want to get too ahead of myself. I want to make sure that my audio is good. If you can hear me okay in the comment section, I'm testing out some new equipment today. In the comment section, just type okay if my audio is clear. I want to make sure that you can hear me okay. So if you would, just type okay in the comment section if you can hear me okay. Want to acknowledge some people who I saw just join me today. Hello, Mr. Roy. Thank you so much for tuning in. Blessings to you, sir. All right, I see that. Thank you so much for tuning in from the YouTube channel. So today is all about the eviction crisis. I've said many times before that we are going to see an increase in court cases, but today is all about tenant evictions. Hello, Gwendolyn. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you. Welcome. So I am Karissa Span, the abundantly blessed landlord and tenant expert, and this is what I do each and every Monday. I touch on subject matters that impact the rental community. So I share information for landlords, I share information for tenants, but ultimately, my only goal is to provide information and education for the entire rental community. So let me just put my disclaimer up. Information that I share today or any other Monday is not legal advice. However, it is the industry's best tips and practices. However, if you do have questions pertaining to any of the segment today, I do welcome you to drop in your comment, your questions, any remarks or observations. I will respond to them accordingly. All right. And so today's discussion is all about the eviction crisis. If you're watching a replay, thank you. If you find that this information is of value, if you find that it's helpful, if you believe that tenants or landlords, housing providers, property managers should tune in, like, tag, and share this information. It costs you nothing but your time to show up to get this information. And I promise this is for somebody today. All right. And today's discussion is meant to be an eye opener for people who may not be as knowledgeable, who may not be aware or abreast of the changes and what are some things that are causing this uptick or this increase in the evictions that we're starting to see. All right. Thank you so much, Gwendolyn. I'm so excited that you are able to catch me live each and every Monday. I'm right here. So listen, if you have questions, go ahead and drop it in the comment section. I promise that I'm going to touch on as much as I can today, but I will definitely answer questions as long as I'm on. Okay. So I have been made aware that throughout the city, throughout the state, throughout the nation, that eviction cases have skyrocketed. The numbers are alarming. That's why I want to touch on it today. It denotes to me that there are going to be thousands of families and children without a home. Now, a home may not be a house. It could be an apartment. It could be a condo. It could be a single family home. It could be a mobile home, right? But whatever the style is with this increase in evictions, a lot of people and families are going to be without a home. That is so troubling. And I know that sometimes landlords who are, especially, let me just say that landlords who are doing the right thing and they're striving to do the right thing, they want to offer housing, they want to make sure that it is affordable. They are going above and beyond to make sure that the rental properties are decent, safe, and sanitary. Sometimes they get a bad or raw deal from tenants who are either not paying their rent, or maybe there's some sort of housing violations going on in the property, or maybe it's just a difference of opinion. Sometimes landlords don't like tenants and tenants don't like the landlord. In any event, one of the things that I always say when it comes to being a landlord or a housing provider, that you should always treat your business like a business and it will pay you like a business. If you treat it like a hobby, it's also going to pay you like a hobby. So, this increase in the eviction rate that is sweeping through the nation is super alarming. But I want us to think about, who does it impact? Well, looking at the nature, the categories of the eviction cases, they're mostly low income individuals and families who are impacted the most by evictions. Now, I'm not saying that all evictions are low income families, but the larger number does fall in that particular category. They can no longer, some of these families can no longer rely on funds that were available. For instance, when we were in the pandemic some years ago, there were some monies, there were some resources and funds available throughout the nation, throughout different states and cities. Well, in some of those jurisdictions, the funding is simply not there. So there's no cushion, there is nothing for those tenants. There are no resources available for them to tap into. And if they don't have the money, then obviously the landlord within their right can and have been taking these tenants to court to have them evicted for non-payment of rent. And here's the thing, it's hard to recover when a tenant is delinquent on their rent and they don't have the resources. That's a challenging and a difficult place to be if they don't have anywhere that they can go. It's hard to recover from that. And a lot of these landlords are struggling financially. And here is what I want you to understand. If you are a tenant, landlords still have to pay the bills of that particular rental property. They may have a mortgage. There are other costs associated with maintaining the rental property. I know that many tenants feel that landlords are evil. I've seen some pictures where, and they were hilarious in nature, but I know that sometimes people don't really think on the flip side, but I saw pictures where tenants accuse landlords of being rip-offs, and they just assume that all landlords are millionaires, they rich, and they have it made. Well, that's not always the case. And especially in communities where there are smaller landlords, meaning that they have 1, 2, maybe 12 rental units, right? Those are small landlords. They don't have thousands of doors. They don't have all this extra cushion of money just sitting around under their mattress, right? They're really trying to do the right thing by providing investment property to people who they feel should deserve, or they feel deserving of living in those particular communities. Well, as a tenant, please know, keep in mind and understand that the same way, and here's what I tell tenants, because I am a housing educator. I teach landlords, I teach tenants. And one of the things that I always say, think of it like this. If it was your money, would you want people to withhold your money? Would you want people to play with your money? Right? And so from a tenant's perspective, having a roof over your head is always important. if your lights get turned off, if your electric is off, if you have no running water, if your cell phone is cut off, if you have no food in your refrigerator, God forbid any of that to happen. But if it happens, at the very least, make sure that you pay your rent. Have a roof over your head, because if your lights are off, it's nobody's business. Nobody know that your lights are off. If you have no food in your refrigerator, you still should have a roof over your head. So paying your rent should be priority number one. Okay. But before I get into the tips, those are not tips that I want to share specifically today. I'm going to share some tips for landlords, and I'm going to share some tips for tenants. All right. So let me get into that. Let me come to the comment section. Gwendolyn, sorry for the text. That was way too long. I know you want to hear what I have to say. You're the only person I want to talk to about this. Okay, so Gwendolyn, if you have emailed me, please give me another day or so to respond. I'm just coming back from the holiday break. I was out of town on vacation a little, if you will. So if you sent me an email, I will definitely respond. And if you need my email address, I'm going to provide that for all of you on today, in case you do need to reach me, in case you want to work with me. I want to make sure that you can reach me. Okay. So thank you for that. All right. So when it comes to how this is impacting the rental community, these tenants are, like I said, the largest category from what I've seen as pertains to this eviction increase are low-income families, low-income tenants, tenants who don't have legal representation, okay? And an overwhelming number are females, head of household, female families, single females. That is a larger class of tenants who are being evicted. Families with children are being evicted. And these cases are alarming. In many cases, they do involve substandard living conditions. So what does that mean? Meaning that maybe they haven't paid their rent. Maybe they're living in communities where repairs have gone incomplete. Maintenance hasn't been, maybe maintenance issues have really been alarming, right? And so sometimes when these cases go to court, or before they go to court, sometimes, just depending on the jurisdiction, tenants will complain to the judge and say, hey, Your Honor, I would have paid my rent, but my landlord refused to make repairs, or I told my landlord that my toilet was backed up, the only toilet that I can use, the only bathroom that I could use, it was backed up. And so sometimes there are a lot of differences, there are a lot of challenges, and the nuances of dealing with these type of matters are always troubling to me, because I just believe that with proper communication, sometimes a little education, could be education for landlords, could be education for the tenants. Sometimes I just believe that because of those barriers, that these parties are finding themselves at this fork in the road. Do they go to court? Do they not go to court? Do they get an eviction? Do they not get an eviction? Excuse me. So I did a little research because I wanted to find out what areas are being hit the hardest. And so I see that I have quite a few viewers who are from the DC metropolitan area. So in just DC alone, from January of last year to January of this year, the amount of evictions have increased by 250%. That's just DC alone. That's according to the U.S. Marshal Service. And those court cases are carried out in DC Superior Court. But now also, I did some research and I wanted to find out what the numbers look like in Virginia. And those numbers are alarming as well. So in Virginia, there's an 80% increase. In Maryland, it takes about, on average, between 32 days and 5 months for an eviction to take place in Maryland. But even in Maryland, those eviction rates have increased. And so here's the thing that I want people to know and understand. As a landlord, please make sure that as you are preparing for evictions, that you understand what the process is. Make sure that you reduce the possibility of making mistakes and errors because you don't want your court case to be kicked out. Here's why. So I just said that in Maryland, it takes about 32 days to 5 months. Well, in DC is through the roof. There's a huge backlog in DC. Now, Virginia's a little bit better. The backlog is not that huge. And the cases are starting to pile up throughout the nation. I checked California. I checked New York. Those rates have increased. And so you want to make sure that you're not caught up as a landlord, that you're not caught up in this backlog of cases that has to go before the judge. All right. And so I have some tips that I want to share for landlords. Let me go to my comment section and then I'm going to come back. All right. Hey, Mr. Bell, my hot water and cold shower water was shut off November 22nd for no reason. I asked my management why I had you don't have an answer for the shut off. You put in a work order November 22nd is back on today. Well, I'm happy to hear that it's back on, but I'm sorry to hear that you had to experience that. No tenant deserves to be in a rental property where there's no running water. Not unless it's an emergency. And so I know that sometimes when emergencies come up, those are circumstances and situations that landlords don't have control over. It's in the law. If the landlord doesn't tell me anything about why my shower, hot and cold water was off, absolutely, that is the law. You're absolutely right. And you're welcome. It's my pleasure. So now I have been in the property management space for almost 30 years. And I know I look 27. But no, seriously. So I've been in the industry for quite a bit of time, working in various roles and capacities. And so in the capacity of managing properties, sometimes, and I don't know if this was the case with your landlord and why the water was shut off, but sometimes if there's an emergency or maybe if there's a pipe burst or a pipe leak, the landlord may have to shut the water off for that entire, if it's a building, they may have to shut the water off to the building to make the repair, make sure they do it timely, turn the water back on. And so if that's the case, then you probably didn't get notice. But I don't know if that was the situation. I'm not saying either way it is or not, because I don't know specifically what happened, but I just sometimes try to think outside of the box in terms of why things happen and then try to explain it just from a general standpoint. Hello, Dr. Juan Johnson. The eviction rate nationwide is epidemic, especially for women. Absolutely, absolutely. You're so spot on with that, Juan. The rates are through the roof, and it does impact a large majority of those who are being evicted are women. All right, so let me get back into the tips that I want to share for, let me share tips for tenants first. Then I'm gonna come back to you as a landlord. So as a tenant, if you are in a situation and you face the possibility or you're threatened that you're going to be taken to court or you're going to be evicted, especially for non-payment of rent, here's a tip I want you to know as a tenant, okay? Definitely begin your search and apply for rental assistance programs. I know that some of you have reached out to me and my team and I, we can find out where resources are. We will definitely, if you email me, we will respond to you to let you know if we can find some resources that are available. But as a tenant, if you're delinquent on your rent, it doesn't matter if you're a market tenant, if you're participating in a housing program, do research. Don't wait until you go to court. If you get a notice for court, if you get a notice saying that you're delinquent on your rent, don't wait, because the problem is never going to go away on its own. Your delinquent rent balance is not going to mysteriously erase itself, right? So if you get a notice, I know that it can be alarming, right? Still start looking for programs that could assist you with paying your rent. There are some programs that will also assist you in paying your utilities, whether it's the water bill, the electric bill. So sometimes you just have to do a little research. If you receive a court date, listen, one of the things that I've seen even with evictions is that sometimes tenants don't show up and the landlord get an automatic judgment. They're automatically granted the right to evict tenants. If you get a notice to go to court, show up and plead your case. Explain to the judge, explain to the court why you haven't paid rent or why there was a lease violation, right? Explain it, admit it, explain it, and then try to resolve it. But before that, I always express or try to convey to landlords and tenants, communicate one with the other. Let the landlord know what's happening. Sometimes landlords are willing to work with tenants if you've been a good tenant. Now, if you're a tenant from hell, and I'm a realist, okay, I'm not bashing anybody, okay, but I am a realist. And so I share information from both sides of the aisle. If you are a problem tenant and you know that you intentionally are doing things to create problems for the landlord, in many cases, and usually landlords are not willing or don't want to work with tenants who are displaying that type of behavior. But if you are a good tenant and you have legit reasons why your rent is late or why there's a lease violation, communicate that, admit it, explain it, and resolve it. Here's a third tip for tenants on today. You want to, at all costs, avoid evictions. I see your comments coming in, and I'm going to come to the comment section. Avoid evictions. If possible, communicate with the landlord. And here's the thing. If you know that this landlord is taking you to court to have you evicted, agree to possibly vacate before it gets to that level. Because here's the thing, and here's why that's important. Landlords, let me back up before I go there. Everybody needs a place to stay. Everybody needs a roof over your head. And so if you have an eviction on your rental record, it could be potentially hard for you to rent somewhere else. Sometimes landlords do not want to rent from people who have been evicted. It just sends a bad message. It's a red flag. And I know that sometimes bad things happen to good people. I know that circumstances change and maybe your income has been affected. Maybe your wages are not there anymore. You don't make the money that you used to make, or the dynamics have changed in your household, right? And you are in a situation, you're in a place whereas you're not able to pay your rent. Well, communicate that to your landlord and maybe move out before you are evicted. The landlord don't have to keep you there, but you have a choice. You have an option as to whether or not an eviction goes in your record. Because like I said, if you get it, you may get the next landlord. It could be the perfect place, and they'll say, "No, we're going to take a pass on this one. We're choosing a better or more qualified tenant to rent our property," and that's their right. They don't have to accept you if you have an eviction on your record. So try to communicate. Try to search for housing programs and housing shelters. I know that sometimes that's not an easy thing to do. Sometimes people are embarrassed or ashamed, but I promise that if you get into one of those programs, that's much better than being on the street. And that's much better if you can get into a shelter or a housing program. That's a whole lot better than having an eviction on your record. All right, so let me come to my comment sections, and then I'm going to give tips for landlords. So if you're a landlord, stick around because I got some tips for you. Hey, Sherry, thank you so much for tuning in today. Can you give feedback on retaliatory evictions not based on non-payment of rent, but on retaliation on the part of the landlord? Absolutely. It is against the law for landlords to retaliate. Point blank, period. It's against the law. So if you have, as a tenant, any tenant, if you have a situation and you're seeking help, maybe you've reported your landlord to the local authority because of something they have not done, landlords by law cannot retaliate. By law, in the United States, housing providers are required to provide housing that's decent, safe, and sanitary. And so if there's some housing conditions that are not met, that's not up to code, and tenants complain, landlords cannot retaliate. And if they do, tenants have the right to take that landlord to court. So I would never advise landlords to retaliate. Here here are some behaviors that would fall in the category of retaliatory behavior. So let's say, for instance, a tenant complained, and thank you again so much, Sherry, for that question. So let's say, for instance, you have a tenant who complained that their garbage disposal has been backed up, and the garbage disposal isn't working. The sink it was backing up. Now it's completely stopped up. There is nothing flowing through, and it's just food debris, and it's a little smelly, right? And so the tenant decide that they're going to report it to the housing inspector in that particular jurisdiction. So a housing inspector comes out, they stop by the property, and they slam this landlord. Not just with that, but the landlord wasn't aware that there was mold in another part of the rental unit. So they're slammed with mold. They're slammed with the fact that there is a smoke detector. There's supposed to be 2 working smoke detectors in this property. Neither one are working. The batteries have been removed for whatever reason. And the inspector slams this housing provider because there are no working smoke detectors, right? Not only that, but the landlord didn't know that the bars that are on the window to provide safety so that nobody can break into the property supposed to be a thumb lock. Well, the bars have a lock where you need a key, and the tenant would not be able to get out unless they had a key in an emergency. And so based off of that one call, that housing provider has been slammed, hit hard with a lot of fines, $2, $3, $4, $5,000 in fines. And this happens, right? So the landlord was only aware of that one matter. And then all of a sudden they're provided with this list of issues and fines. And so the landlord turns around, upset that they have to pay $3, $4, $5,000 in fines, retaliate, tell the tenant, you know what? I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to sell the property, and you can stay in there until the next person comes in. Or, they just begin to just do things and say things to kind of aggravate the situation. That would be some idea of retaliation. Or maybe saying that I can't afford it, I'm not doing it. And if you say something else, we're not going to do ABC, XYZ. So those are just some examples. And of course, there's a whole laundry list of just other things that happens. But that was a great question. Thank you for that, Sherry. All right. I need to move. I'm low income subsidy. I need rental assistance. Do me a favor and email me. So stick around. I'm going to provide you with my email address. I want you to email me. Let me know what jurisdiction you're in. My team and I can maybe do some research to find out what might be available to you. All right. You said my building had no emergency notice for the water shut off. Okay. Got it. Let's see. Gwendolyn, you are from Wilmington, Delaware. Got it. Thank you. Okay, Sherry, I see that. Thank you so much. All right. You said you will email me. You are in Trenton. Okay. So when you email me, just put that information in the email. I will definitely have my team to look into it, and we will follow up with you. All right. So now here are my tips for landlords. I am going to try to get through as much information as I can because I'm drawing near on time, and I definitely want to respect everybody's time. So here are tips for landlords. I gave 3 tips for tenants. Here are 3 tips for landlords. And again, if you find that this information is of value, please like, please tag, please share it with somebody else. This information costs you nothing but your time to receive it. All right, so landlord tip number 1, before you file for eviction, please make sure that you understand the process. Make sure that you know what forms you must complete and provide to your tenants. You also should understand what the filing requirements are. You should always know and understand whether or not you must have a business license, a renter's license. If you're in a jurisdiction where the rents must be registered, you want to make sure all of that is done. Or if the rent should be exempt, right? On the rent control laws. You want to make sure that you understand the process. Here's why that's important. Because if you go through the process, and let's say you have a tenant, and I have seen situations where tenants did not pay their rent because of the pandemic. They had gone years without paying the rent. The rent was due, the rent was owed to the owner. Facts. Let's agree on that. Rent is still due, regardless. Okay. Landlords did not know and understand the process. They filed for eviction, got a court date, went before the judge in the courtroom, and the judge kicked the case out because the tenants were not served properly, or they didn't have a business license, or they never completed the registration or the exemption forms. And so, although the rent was due, the tenant owed the money, thousands of dollars. The court case was kicked out. So make sure that you understand the process before you file. And if you're in the process of getting ready to serve the tenant, go ahead and do everything that you have to do so that by the time you get to the judge, you have all of your ducks lined up in a row. Okay. Second thing, I'm kind of rushing now. I always recommend landlords to conduct an inspection before you go to court. Can anybody in the comments section tell me why that might be important? Why might it be important for a landlord to conduct an inspection for repairs and complete them in advance before going to court? I'll wait a few minutes. I'll wait a few seconds rather. Put in the comment section if you can tell me, if you just have an idea of why that might be important. All right, Mr. Bell, I see your comment. Thank you so much. All right, in the comment section, go ahead and drop it in there for me. Why might this be important for landlords to do? So I shared how landlords should know the requirement. I shared how they should know what paperwork should be filed. And now I'm suggesting that landlords conduct inspections. Why do you think that's important? Anybody, whether you're a landlord, you're a tenant, you're just watching, you're tuned in. I see you on Facebook. I see you on LinkedIn. I see you on YouTube. Why do you think it's important for landlords to conduct inspections for needed repairs and to complete them before going to court? Can anybody take a guess? Don't be afraid to respond. Why might that be important? And so while you are typing your responses, let me do this. Let me pull up my email address because I want to make sure that if you do need to contact me, you have my contact information. So that's my email address below, info@landlordlife.com. That is how you can reach me. My team and I, we will follow up with you. So if you email me, please provide your full name, the city and state that you are inquiring of, and then let us know whatever the issues are, what the concern is, and we will follow with you. All right, so that's my email address right there. So let me go back here. All right. So here, as it pertains to the inspection, I suggested that landlords should conduct the inspection for repairs and complete them. Somebody text me their response. So here's why that's important. Because I shared a little earlier how sometimes landlords are not aware of the problems. They're not aware of the issues. And so if you know you're going to take a tenant to court, conduct an inspection for needed repairs, make sure that you complete the repairs, because sometimes you can go to court and the tenant could be completely wrong, right? And probably do deserve a writ based off of whatever the violations are. But if there are any issues that you have in your rental property, you want to make sure that you leave no evidence. And here's why that's important. Because if you go before the judge, You never want to be perceived or considered a slum landlord or a slum lord. About a week ago, I shared a few stories of what a rental property looked like because the landlord did not make repairs. So if you're taking a tenant for something that they haven't done, make sure that you're not guilty for being in violation. So go ahead, conduct an inspection for needed repairs, make the repairs before you go to court so that worst case scenario, your court case is not thrown out. Some jurisdictions are really strict on landlords. Some are not as strict. And so, especially in those areas where you know that it's a possibility that the judge is going to side with the tenant, go ahead and make those repairs. Make those repairs. I know that sometimes that's a pain. I know that sometimes you may not have the money, but I promise you that if you just go the extra mile to do what you're supposed to do, and if the tenant is violation, then you have a fair chance to having a fair shot at trying to get an eviction, right? But definitely take care of repairs in advance. So here is another tip I want to share today. This is for landlords. Never take shortcuts. Never, ever, ever, ever take shortcuts. And never, ever, ever, ever conduct a self-help eviction. What is a self-help eviction? I'm glad you asked. A self-help eviction is when a landlord changes the locks without an eviction, without the courts granting them the option or the ability to change a lock. A self-help eviction is when, let's say, the landlord just walk in and just start putting the tenant stuff out on the street. That's a self-help eviction. Tenants can sue you for that. So there's usually a process in place before the eviction happens. You do have to do a number of things. You want to make sure that you serve the tenant properly. You want to make sure that you go to court and that the judge issues you a writ, an eviction, meaning you're granted the ability to move forward with getting the eviction against the tenant. And so after that happens, you have to wait for the local authority, whether it's the police, the sheriff, the marshals, whoever is responsible for carrying out or making sure that the eviction is legally handled and handled properly. There's a process, and when you go before the court, the judge would typically tell you what that process looked like, what you can expect, how long that's going to be, any contact information to the agency that's going to be responsible for assisting you with carrying out that eviction. Then after that, you have the right to go ahead and evict the tenant. Now, just depending on where the property is located, you can put their things out right away. Maybe you have to give them time to come back, or maybe you have to wait a certain amount of days before you can actually put their belongings out. It just depends on the jurisdiction and where that rental property is. That will determine what actions you can take. And the laws are not the same in every state, in every jurisdiction. Okay. And then here is a big tip. After that eviction happens, the same day that it happens, the same day that you're granted the option or the ability to remove the tenant's belongings, always make sure that you change those locks. That's so important. Make sure those things are in place. Understand what the laws are. Understand what you can and cannot do. And so I just wanted to touch on that today. I know that this was a lot of information and I was trying to get through it. Maybe I'll come back next week for part 2. But I did want to, at the very least, just share this helpful information for the entire rental community. So I shared tips for tenants. I shared tips for landlords. The tips that I share for landlords is to conduct the search, apply for emergency rental assistance programs if you are in need of those resources. You also want to make sure that if you do get a court date that you actually show up. Don't just not show up, because the court case is going to go on whether you're there or not. So it's always better that you show up, plead your case, admit it, explain it, and try to resolve it. Communicate with your landlord, try to resolve it, try to move out before you are actually evicted, because an eviction on your record could potentially make it harder for you to rent from someone else. I shared tips for landlords on today as well. Before the eviction process, I suggested that you understand what the laws are. Make sure that you have everything that you need in place. Make sure that if you have to have a business license, a renter's license, if you have to register the rent or get the exemption of that rent, you want to do all of that before you go to court. I also advise landlords to conduct an inspection for needed repairs and actually complete the repairs. And finally, for landlords, never take shortcuts and never, ever, ever carry out self-help evictions. All right. So that's what I wanted to share today. And let me share my email address again for those who want to reach me. If you have questions, if you want to work with me as a client, I and my team and I, we are excited to offer services to you, whether it's coaching, consultant, or auditing services. We are here for you. We are here with you. If you're a tenant, we are here with you. We're here for you. Any resources that we can provide, we can help you navigate your situation. Please email me, info@landlordlife.com, info@landlordlife.com. I thank you so much for tuning in on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and YouTube. My time is up. I absolutely thank you for yours. Was this helpful today? I hope that this was helpful today. I hope that as a landlord, you learn what not to do if you are a tenant or you know someone who is. I hope that you know now what to do in advance in the event that you are in a situation and you need help, that you remember the tips that I shared today. Is that all right? This is what I do each and every Monday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Facebook, right here on LinkedIn, and right here on YouTube. And again, I am Karissa Span, the abundantly blessed landlord and tenant expert. It's been an absolute pleasure to share this information with you. I look forward to seeing you all next week, right here, same station, same time. And by way of announcement, if you have not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please go to YouTube, smash that subscribe button so that you'll be the first to know when I am live and when I am online. All right. I'll see you all next week.